The wind blew the scent of the sweet spring breeze across the fields. This era of peace was unlike the bloody days that brought it, yet the land was tranquil all the same. But not for everyone. A civilian who was simply on their way home from the markets was attacked on the country road by a small gang of ruffians, and their leader took a surprisingly sadistic pleasure in tormenting them. They laughed at the misfortune of their prey, only for the wind to carry the sound of a bell to their ears. They froze against this singular tone, turning their heads to see the source. In the distance was a robed wanderer, walking the same road as them. The bell tolls again. Now the metal instrument can be seen dangling from the wide-brimmed casa the stranger was wearing on their head. The gang leader chuckled at their luck, ordering their underlings to mug this new target. They did as they were told, and started to make their way to the wanderer. So proud were they of their recent robbery, they failed to appraise this would-be victim. As they leapt toward the stranger, they were beaten down by the blunt end of something, but it happened so fast they didn't even know what it was. The bell on the wanderer's hat tolled a third time, as their assailants fell to the ground, whining in pain. The wanderer looked down at them and sighed, realizing their only sins were that of immaturity and foolishness, something this minor beating would teach them not to do again. The gang leader watched in shock as they realized the weapon that bludgeoned their underlings was a sheathed katana. The ruffian grabbed the innocent civilian they had been hazing, threatening to kill them if the stranger took another step toward them. The wanderer stopped as demanded. They felt the wind on their fingertips, and sensing the hostility in the air, they realized this brute wasn't lying. They'd kill just for the sake of it. The wanderer bowed toward the road as they assumed a stance, taking a deep breath. They looked ready to draw their weapon, but was still many paces away. The gang leader opened their mouth to shout another warning at them, but the only noise on the wind was the bell from the wanderer's hat, tolling a fourth time. The stranger was now behind them, sword already drawn and in the end of a swing. The eyes of the would-be leader rolled back as they collapsed to the ground, their body growing cold. The innocent civilian was shook, but realized they were spared as the wanderers silently sheathed their sword and continued walking down the road. Welcome back, my friends. It's high time we got back to analyzing some of the world's most recognizable disciplines. In this case study, we'll be moving back to the Far East, to the lands of Hingashi, where another martial art would be developed around the same time as modern ninjutsu. The swordsmen that practiced this art were born during times of fierce infighting, but after the dust began to settle and battles ended, they found new purpose as keepers of the peace. Through the way of the sword, practitioners of this art found enlightenment. Today, my friends, let us dive into a life of faithful service and calm contemplation. Today, let us discuss what it means to be a samurai. In the early years of the Sixth Astral Era, Hingashi was devoured by a conflict known as the Age of Blood. Like the city-state of Biladia, a fight over succession sparked a civil war that ravaged their home. This conflict lasted for 300 years, and even after it was settled, a second conflict of interest between rival clans would continue the fighting for hundreds more. However, the birth of the samurai as we know them today began during those first 300 years of civil war. You see, the word samurai is more than that of one who practices a martial art. It was originally a title, something that gave a person social standing within Hingashi. In truth, the original samurai were nothing more than martial vassals, individuals who pledged their blades and lives to their liege in exchange for unique privileges within that leader's territory. Even the word samurai comes from the root word saburao, which is a verb that translates into Eorzean as to serve. In order to be a samurai, one must always be living in service to someone or something. Likewise, anyone who draws their blade for selfish gains or petty reasons could never be considered a true samurai. But it was during these early years as vassals to nobles that the samurai became well known. They served whatever role their masters demanded, but these jobs usually involved becoming bodyguards in one way or another. Over the years, the modern samurai would adopt the katana as their weapon of choice given its elegant form, but it would become their staple for another reason entirely. Suffice to say, these long years of war and conflict turned out to be the perfect training ground for a new style of combat, giving samurais no shortage of opponents to hone their craft against. Eventually, they learned how to infuse their swings with their own personal aether, increasing the strength and speed of their strikes. These arts of channeling aether would be known as kenki, with meditative stances becoming what we know as sen. And finally, this led to them creating the famous styles of iaijutsu. These styles of swordplay were without peer in Hingashi, and brought a swift end to many opponents, making the samurai's name even more famous. But these wars never last forever, and eventually, the Mitsurugi clan claimed dominance, and with them returned the land's peace and civility. Once peace became commonplace, the samurai were free to put down their blades or travel, with some moving to the mainland of Othard and creating their own schools of swordplay. But as the years went by, the true samurai arts started to fade as peace times began to wash away the need for talented swordsmen. Eventually, the name samurai became more of a hereditary title and meant little in terms of swordplay, leaving many to wonder if this style of combat would die in the same millennium it was born in. In the second half of the Sixth Astral Era, there was a select few who upheld the traditions created by the founding samurai. While some continued to serve the leaders of Hingashi, a good number of them became wanderers, choosing instead to serve their country. It's rumored that these times of peace began to lead the samurai down a spiritual path, one that would see them becoming keepers of peace, and only drawing their blade to cut out any evil that would spoil the tranquility of their land. Not only did this include the swift execution of dangerous criminals and monsters, but it also involved cutting away the sins of those who truly regret their actions and wish to repent. By confessing one's sins to a samurai, they may stand as judge. If they swing their blade, but you're ultimately unharmed, then it was your sins that they excised from your soul. In so doing, they cut away the evil that would disturb the peace without taking a life. This allowed them to stay true to their code and continue on their path all the same. But this passive and ultimately humble way of life wasn't for everyone, which saw the number of true samurais in the world dwindle even further. Now there are only a handful that are truly worthy of the name, with there being countless pretenders trying to ride on the coattails of this noble profession. But those who truly walk the path of the samurai are worthy of respect, as they've chosen a life of service to the greater good, whether that be to stand at the side of a righteous master or simply serve the land. Now that we've covered their history, let us go over the powers and abilities which made them so famous in the first place. The fundamentals on which a samurai bases the rest of their skills is superior swordplay and making the blade an extension of their body. Traditionally, a samurai inherits their style of swordplay from their mentor. But with the attunement of soul crystals, it's possible for someone to emulate the skills of the previous holders without a proper guide. But swordplay will only take you so far. What truly sets the samurai apart from others is how they make their personal pool of aether interact with their sword arts. To understand this art of combat, we must first examine the nomenclature. Many martial arts and cultures have different words for one's personal pool of aether. Monks refer to their aether as chakra, dark knights call it the abyss, and a samurai is no different. They refer to their personal pool of aether as ki. Understanding the flow of one's personal aether, or rather, their ki, is the first step to mastering the arts of a samurai. Next, they learn how to control and channel that flow through training and meditation. The process of a samurai harnessing their ki for battle is called kenki. By mastering kenki, a samurai is able to infuse their blade and movements with aether, allowing them to slash and stab with greater speed and force than normally possible. Realistically, whenever someone attempts to make a strong swing, a lot of force is built up, slowing the attack down. Likewise, in order to attack quickly, one usually has to sacrifice strength of impact. This is the normal relationship between speed and power. However, with mastery over Kenki, a samurai breaks this rule and is able to deliver a flurry of blows at lightning-fast speeds while still attacking with enough force to cut open metal armor and penetrate the thickest monster hides. But it doesn't stop there. With mastery over Kenki comes an understanding of Sen, the meditative states. Known as Getsu, Ka, and Setsu, these three pathways help to keep a samurai calm and focused during even the most chaotic of battles. This mental and spiritual clarity places them into a combative trance, allowing them to perform their most sacred techniques without interruption. The iaijutsu. Given the amount of focus and discipline needed for this technique, many have failed to master it. To perform an iaijutsu, a samurai must first reach Sen, after which they sheathe their katana. While sheathed, a samurai pours aether into the scabbard, causing pressure to build and soaking the blade in power. Once these preparations are complete, the iaijutsu is performed. And all that stockpiled energy is released all at once, causing the blade to be drawn with such speed that the eye cannot follow it, and a strike with enough force to cleave a mountain in two. Such is the power of a fully realized iaijutsu. This technique is what caused many to second-guess their fights if their opponent was a samurai. Against the iaijutsu, there was no defense. Now that we've discussed their history and abilities, let us move on to their choice of weapons and attire. The katana has a strange yet storied history in the Far East. Originally, Othard made use of traditional long swords like most cultures during the early years. Eventually, a cavalry branch from the land of Ningxie made use of unique curved blades that resembled scimitars. These swords eventually found their way to Hingashi, but without a cavalry to make use of its unique design, the length and curve of the blade was drastically reduced, resembling the modern katana more and more. But it wasn't until a blacksmith in Kugane discovered a method of folding steel that the katana would truly be born. This folding method increased the tensile strength immeasurably, and was nigh indestructible when struck by the edge of the blade. This smithing method and the swords that created it were revered as things of art and beauty, with the folding pattern on the blade making every sword entirely unique. Because of the weapon's elegance and power, the samurai commissioned them for personal use in great numbers. But as the samurai experimented with their ki, they realized how to make these weapons even more deadly. Special scabbards were commissioned alongside the sword to make a unique pair. The scabbard would act as the vessel for a samurai's aether, whilst the sword would be what carries that power to their targets. Now we'll go over their choice of attire. In its early years, most samurai would wear full body armor with ornate helmets to show off their allegiance and protect them more thoroughly. But as the Age of Blood gave way to years of peace, these heavy suits of armor became cumbersome. They abandoned heavy armor altogether, electing to wear elegant hayori stylized in the fashion of militaristic jinbayori. But these outfits were more like a formal dress than anything. However, as the samurai began to wear this outfit more and more often, it was redesigned with some of its original defensive aspects in mind. This made their robes more combat ready, but with one new augmentation in mind: to enhance the flow of one's personal aether. Because of how intense the flow of aether becomes during the execution of a samurai's most powerful techniques, their garb was enchanted in a similar method to that of a mage's robes, all to help stimulate the flow of aether. Indeed, it's been stated that in some circles, techniques like the iaijutsu and hisatsu both could be considered their own spell schools. That being said, A samurai's mage-like robes usually means they're trying to avoid getting hit, or at the very least, end a fight quickly so that they don't have to suffer too much damage. And now you know the true origin and traditions of a samurai. From noble vassals to magical swordsmen, the samurai have grown tremendously over the years, with each master honing their craft a bit more than the last. While considered peacekeepers following the way of the blade, they're only a few steps away from being considered full-fledged spellcasters thanks to the surprising levels of control they have over their aether. To those who walk the path of the samurai, hear me now. Yours is a path of service. To your master, your country, or your world, you've pledged your blade and your skills to this honorable cause. Through rigorous training, you've honed your body, and with peaceful meditation, you've calmed your mind. Now, there is only you and your task. As such, your opponents will start to realize that once you've taken your stance, there's nothing in this world you cannot cut. Hello everyone! Thanks for staying to the end of the lesson. If you enjoyed this and want to see more, subscribe and like this video to let me know I'm doing well. If there is a topic you'd want me to cover in the future, leave a comment about it and I'll see what I can do. Until next we meet, I'll be researching even more of our world's rich lore to share with you. Till then, stay safe my friends.